Well, g'day and welcome back to the shed. If you watched the first part of this series, you'll realise that I bought this little radio on my way back from Tasmania, and I stopped off in Melbourne and brought it back on the plane in my backpack, and I haven't had much luck with it. It was filthy, but quite apart from that, I applied power to it by dim bulb, restricted power, and it did nothing. Having a look underneath it, I noticed that all these little black capacitors were cracked up and looked in a very bad state. So I changed all the caps, all of these caps in it, and the filter caps, and tried powering it up again, and even on unrestricted power it still wouldn't speak to me at all. So I guess it's time to have a look a bit further. We'll find out what's wrong with it, hopefully, and maybe get it going. About the only thing I have done with this since I finished the last video is to give the cabinet a wash. I haven't tried to polish it or anything, but it has come up pretty well. Whoa, that was close. Okay, I breathe again. As I was saying, it has come up pretty well, and despite my recent attempts, it hasn't got any cracks in it or anything like that. The front panel's come up quite well. I think this is a good deal more yellow than the original colour, just based on the inside, although it's not too bad. And I'll have to have a look at what we can do to perhaps get that back to the original colour. But it's not going to do us any good if the radio doesn't work, so I think that's the next thing. I'll have a look at it and see what we can do. A gentleman by the name of Andrew from Electrosound sent me a link to a video he had done, a YouTube video, and you should check out his YouTube channel if you haven't already, Electrosound. And so I've used that as a guide to pulling the clock out, and I think I want to remove the clock first up to give me access to the rest of the chassis, and so that I can get in there and do a bit of cleaning. So based on this, I should be able to just undo these two screws, and this plastic cover will remove. Anyway, this should now just remove upwards. There's a couple of spring clips on the bottom, and there we have the clock mechanism. So we have what looks like a motor here, whole bunch of connectors here, and this is the knob that changes the alarm time. I've been wondering how you actually change the position of the hands on the clock to set the time, and I think I found the answer to that. There is this rod here on the back of it which does in fact move the hands when I turn it. Now, in Andrew's video there was a long shaft which attached to that and protruded out the back of the cabinet, and there is in fact this corresponding hole in the back of the cabinet that lines up perfectly with that shaft, so that must be what it's for. I think the next step is just to remove these two spacers, and that's coming off quite easily actually. Yep, that's just finger tight. So I'll put that aside. See if the other one's finger tight too. Yeah, I don't need a wrench on it. And now I need to remove the knobs from the clock face, and it should just remove backwards. But before I do, I think I'll just put some power on it and see if I can see anything moving. I think this is just a buzzer. I think the thing that drives the whole thing is this motor. I'll have to see. But let's plug it in and I'll put it on dim bulb, I suppose, although there's no reason to, because I'm not turning the radio on. Oh, and you can see there that the motor is turning. I think that's just rotating, but there seems to be some spring arrangement on it as well. I'm not quite sure how these things work. I'm not very familiar with electric clocks, but something is working, so that's a good thing. That means that it's not burnt out or anything. The rest of it, as I say, is clockwork, so it shouldn't be too hard to fix, hopefully. But I don't want a mess of gears and wheels all over the bench top and be unable to put them back together. So I'm going to be very careful with this. The other two knobs just pulled off. This one is a left-hand thread and just unscrews. So I'll have to remember that when I'm putting it back on. And gee, this looks pretty corroded and ugly. I don't know what I'll be able to do with that. Okay, so this entire clock mechanism should now move back from the main front panel and just lift out. It's like the cover, it just has a couple of spring clips on the bottom. So there we go. That's happening. Oh, of course it has the plug. Now this thing is unplugged. I'll just ease the plug out. There we go. I don't know what the wiring is going to be like inside this either. Well, that's the plug out, and obviously to make the radio work now I will have to jumper the contacts on that plug. But here we have the clock mechanism out all in one piece, and I can probably find a way of powering that up on the bench. Looks like an old gramophone motor in there. I'll see if I can get some more light in there. I don't know how much you can see on the video. There's a worm drive here which runs on another worm drive on the motor spindle here. So I don't know why they would not be working. That then drives the normal looking gear train. I can't see any reason why that would not be working. It looks as if the motor just unbolts from this sub-assembly here, so I might be able to take that out and see what's going on. I would like to power it up though and just see if I can see what's happening inside it. Okay, well, I'll put the clock aside for now and let's concentrate on the radio. So I've jumpered up the contacts, the clock contacts, so that the radio will still work without the clock. And I've plugged it into dim bulb just to make sure that I haven't done anything silly and it doesn't look as if I had. And just wiggling the valves and whatever. And I noticed that this valve is cold. So I think that needs to be looked into. I was just about to start fault finding, starting with the power supply and then the audio stage and then back to the RF stage, although I strongly suspected the issue was in the RF stage or the oscillator. But this valve being cold makes me think that there's a problem there. So I'll have a look at that first before we go any further. So this is a 6BA6, and I looked up the valve data and it shows me that the heater is on pins 3 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, and yeah, we've got continuity there across the heater. The contact seems to be a bit dodgy. I'll also check the socket, but I suspect it's got 6.3 volts. Everything else seems to be working, and I didn't see anything wrong with the wiring, but I will just check that anyway. Yep, there's the heater on there, and that is on pin 4, pin 3 being grounded. Yep, there we go. So there's nothing wrong with that. The voltage is getting to the base of the tube. I suppose we're looking at a dodgy socket. So I'm just cleaning the pins on the tube for a start, just with a box cutter here. I'll go over these with fine steel wool and a bit of contact cleaner. Just going over the socket with a bit of electrical clean and lube, and I'll just clean out all its contacts, just using a dental pixter. I'm also going to use this little jeweler screwdriver to just bend the pins in a little bit. It's a little bit fiddly, but you can get it down the edge there and just bend the contacts in slightly. And I've done that before with good results. I'm particularly interested in 3 and 4, so I'll just give this one a good bend in. Putting it back in. And I'll just plug it in, still on dim bulb, just in case I've done anything stupid, and we'll turn it on. We've got a good glow from the dim bulb here, and just see if anything happens.
Earlier this month, protesters condemned the conviction of for a Binjanja.
Go. Comes in, the team that turns up in the final.
Where does this country go back to us?
Well, there you go. Dirty valve base all along. And just thinking about it, this doesn't have an aerial connected on it to it. So that's working on the ferrite rod alone and on dim bulb. So that's pretty good reception considering we're inside this steel shed here, which normally doesn't get very good reception at all. So this is showing or promising to be a good little radio. Wow, that easy. Obviously I'll still clean the rest of the valve sockets, give the whole lot a clean up. I'll check the resistors because I haven't really checked resistors yet at all, and just go through it and make sure everything's okay. I just pulled the speaker out. It's just held in with 3 screws through the front panel and another one of those little spring clips at the bottom, and I notice it only has one connection, and the rest relies on the ground connection to the chassis. That's pretty old and dirty, so I better make sure that's good and clean. But the speaker itself is beautiful. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's just a bit of fluff. Or is it? Oh, maybe that is a tear in the cone there. I can patch that up with liquid electrical tape. Yeah, and there's a slight tear there. But gee, that's pretty good. Put a little bit around there. And where was that other tear? There's one there somewhere. Yeah, I think that was it there. It's actually cleaning up better than I expected. A lot of this is just dust, greasy dust, and we've got some bits of the coating off the ferrite rod that have fallen onto it. I'll just carefully brush off the top of this socket because I don't want any muck to get into it. And a bit of clean and lube. And I'll go over each socket as I go, just cleaning it out. I'll just wipe that off. And I'll put a bit of tape over the top of that to protect the contacts. Okay, with that on, I'll just give it a squirt of Aero Start. Run out of start, you bastard. But This is the same thing. There are a few stubborn spots there, but most of it just comes straight off. Well, it hasn't come up too badly considering the mess it was in. There are a few spots of corrosion here which I might be able to deal with further, and a few more back here, but overall it's pretty good. I'll possibly try and clean these up further as I go and maybe put some rust converter or something on them, but we'll see. For the moment I just wanted it cleaned up so that I can handle it without getting my hands filthy. So I can't really put it off any longer. I thought I'd better have a look at this clock, and what I've done is I've just jumped up a 240 volt cord to it, taken the neutral off there, made sure the active and neutral are correct, and I have just checked this to ground to make sure that it's not shorted to ground or anything like that, and it isn't. So I'll just plug it in and turn it on. It's on dim bulb anyway, and see there that the motor is rotating. So I'm just going to take this piece off the buzzer. I think this is a buzzer here. This thing must vibrate against it. And this doesn't look as if it has any precise adjustment on it. It's just screwed on, held in place just adjacent to the coil. So if I take this off, I don't think I'll do anything disastrous. There we go, and I'll put that aside. And now I can see down in there. Sorry for the shaky handheld camera. I'll try and hold it as steady as I can. You can see that the worm drive is not engaging with that gear above it. It should be turning that. I'm just going to try and press down on that pivot. And now it's working. Now it's stopped. So this thing obviously works intermittently if you press on it. And I'm looking at this spring arrangement here, and I'm guessing that is attached to some kind of eccentric pivot, which would just put gentle downward pressure on the gear to make it engage with the worm drive, and that's possibly, I'm hoping, just gummed up. The other less attractive possibility is that the whole pivot is worn out. I really don't know. I'm going to have to, I'll start by cleaning it out and seeing if I can get it to work, but this might be a job for a clockmaker. I'm not too sure. If I'm going to have any chance of getting in there to fix that, I'm going to have to move this coil out of the way, and the coil looks as if it's riveted in. It's got a rivet through to the frame here and here. I think this clip on the back may be removable, and I might be able to remove the coil. That will give me some access through to the back of it. The other thing I want to do is just bend these tabs back here and take the front dial off so I can clean that up and deal with it, get that out of the way as well. So I'll start with that actually. I'll bend these tabs back. Just one needs to be twisted a little bit. There'll be another one. There's one there and one there. So making sure it's unplugged. Yes, it's unplugged. Now this one here's bent down flat, so I'll need to get something underneath that. There we go. prise it up and out, and the front dial seems to be coming off. That's 2. There's the other side. The other one is just there. Okay, so that can be cleaned up. I'll put that aside. Looks like the clock face needs a bit of cleaning up as well. We can do that, but first things first, we need it working. Just having a look at this coil here, and I think I can possibly prise this off. Yep, like that. And if I'm lucky, this coil will come off. Yep, there's one end piece there, the coil itself, and the other end piece. And I can see through there that spring arrangement on the pivot. Whether I can get to it and do anything is another matter. Now this coil is attached to this board here, which carries all the wiring to the clock. I guess if I just remove that, looks like these 2 little screws here, not losing that, I'll put that aside over here, and the other one just there. And there it is there. No washers on them. Alright, so where are we now? I should be able to now just lift this off. Yep, just the wiring to the clock motor is holding that. I could possibly pull the clock motor out, but I'm not sure of that yet. And I don't know if I need to really. So having looked at this spring in here, I don't think that does act on an eccentric pivot of any sort as an adjustment. In fact, there seems to be no obvious adjustment between the mesh of that gear and the worm gear that drives it, apart from perhaps in the motor mounting itself. And I'm thinking if I loosen these screws on the motor, I may be able to move it so that the worm drive engages with the gear. I think this is maybe just wear on the gears. Not too sure. But look, we'll give it a go. So I'm just loosening off the 3 mounting screws for the motor. One there, and I'm just going to loosen them. I'm not taking them out. There's one there. And I think there's one on the back. Yep, there's one down there. Oh, and one there, so there's 4 all up. I'll just have to move this electrical board out of the way to get into that. There we go, that's that one. And one in there. Right, now I may or may not be able to move that motor a little bit closer. Has a little bit of movement there, but only just a fraction. I don't see that there's anything that would allow me to adjust it really. Okay, I put a bit of weight on that screwdriver so I can put upward pressure on the motor, and I'll just tighten that up again. Alright, I don't know if that's done any good or not, but I'll plug it in and see if it engages any better. So plugging it in, turning it on, and nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Okay, take the plug out. What have I done? Those are still on the clock wires. Maybe I put too much pressure on that. I have no idea what I've done wrong now. That gear does feel like it's engaged. Maybe I just did it, maybe I just overdid it. I'll loosen the screws off again and just press down on it with my finger, press up on it with my finger. Okay, so that's loosened off now. Let's see if it will run now. No, no sign of life. I've broken it. I've killed it. I guess I could take it out. Can't see as I can do much more harm than I'm already done. I'll put that in there and remove these screws. Okay, so this is all out of circuit. I have the mains wires running to it there and there. Those two wires go to the coil. Those two go to the clock motor. And it was turning before. So I'll plug it back in and see if it now turns. So there we go. Yes, it's now spinning. So where do we go from here? So somehow I have to get this worm drive to engage with this gear here. And looking at the gear, I don't know, but just looking at this, there's I don't know. It looks pretty bad to me. Possibly the only chance I'm going to get is to get another clock mechanism or another one of these drive gears anyway. Might have to write off this clock. I don't know. I don't know. It would be nice to see a good one, working one, and see what it's like. Meanwhile, I'm just going to put this back together and see where we go from here. I could try taking it to a clockmaker and having one made. I expect that would be expensive though. Well, sometimes you get lucky. Bolted the motor back in or screwed it back in with the gears meshing, I guess. Just thinking I was going to put it back together and it would never work again. And it seems to be working. The gears have engaged and it's turning. I've had it running now for about an hour, and apart from the second hand falling off, it hasn't done anything wrong. I just stuck the second hand back on and it's working again now. So look, I'll leave it running for a while, but it looks like we might have had a win. I still don't like the look of that gear there. It could be that's just the way it's cut, but I suspect that it's very worn. But working is working. Well, since the clock is working, touch wood, I've decided to clean this up. The glass, or the plastic I would say, polished up reasonably well. It had some heavy scuff marks in the middle, but I resorted to my old friend the metal polish, and that took most of it out, and then I finished it off with Brasso, and yeah, it's pretty good. It's going to be fine. Not so the brass surround. Not quite sure what to do with this. Parts of the lacquer had come off and it was quite corroded under there. I tried polishing the corroded bits up with Brasso, but of course there's no way that's going to match the colour of the rest of the dial. You can see there it stands out quite a lot. Two things I can do. I can strip all this lacquer off and repolish it and re-lacquer it, and then I'm going to have to mark in the numerals with, I guess, a paint pen very carefully. And I don't know whether I could do that as neatly as the original numerals. It seems a bit unlikely, really. The other option I have is that I can spray this all with a similar colour paint, like a bronze colour paint, and I might be able to, while the paint's wet, with a cotton bud or Q-tip dipped in turpentine or something, wipe the paint off the front of the numerals so that they still show through. That way I can keep the original numeral painting. I don't know which way to go. I'll have to think about this. There's no easy solution to this, but I certainly don't want to put it back on as it is. Well, the clock's been running for about a week now and hasn't missed a beat, really. So I've replaced the perished rubber wiring here. I had to wrap the cord in tape because I had to take the fabric covering off, and I don't have anything really good to replace it with. But it all seems to be okay. The dial face, though, has caused me untold grief. It was badly corroded, and I rubbed it back with fine steel wool and then polished it with metal polish and then Brasso, and it still is a bit patchy. Especially in the corners of the numerals there, and I've also lost a little bit of the paint off the numerals. I can touch that back in with a paint pen. I'm going out soon to buy one. I had the idea of spraying the whole thing with gold paint and then re-going over the numerals. That didn't work, and I ended up wiping it all off and going back to the brass. The gold paint didn't take well to the brass surface and all pulled in. So I think this is probably the best I'm going to get it. It's not too bad. Anyway, I'm pretty much at a loss as to what I can do with it, unless I get another dial face from somewhere, or another whole clock or whatever. But at the moment this is going to have to do. Now, with the chassis, I've replaced the grill cloth on the speaker. I did repair it earlier. You can't really see it well there. And it's held in by this spring clip here, and I'm just about to bolt it back in. I used the original grill cloth. I vacuumed it, cleaned it up as best I could, and then turned it around so the clean side was out. So it's pretty good, and anyway you hardly see it through the plastic grill, so I think it'll be okay as well. So I'm just about to screw this back in, put the clock back into it. I'll take out the jumpers I put in the plug, and we'll just make sure everything's working right. Then I'll give the cabinet a bit of a once over and see if I can put it all back together. So these are the speaker screws, little countersunk head metal threads. There's 3 of them, so I'll just put them back in. Okay, now for the clock. So it should, by rights, just slot into place down here. I'll have to feed that plug underneath, I think. That plug, of course, is going to be a nuisance to get in because the original cord was pretty much formed to the shape it had to be in. So we have a screw, a nut there and a nut there. I'll just have to find those. That's right, the top had these metal spaces in it, so I'll just put them back in. As I recall, they were only finger tight, but I'll do them up as tight as I can. I've cleaned them up a little bit. I mean, they were pretty disgusting, so and I'll just nip them up with the pliers. Just tighten them a bit. Now the next thing should be the plastic cover, but I still have the problem of this shaft here, which changes the time on the clock. And I'm going to have to find a way of replacing that. Okay, so there we have the clock back in. I'll just put these knobs on, and this is a left-hand thread, this one. I gave them a quick clean up. I think they might need a little bit more attention. I can see some dirt on this one still. Okay, and that should pull out and turn the alarm. Yes, it does. There we go. It goes that way. Okay, and that'll be the off-on switch. Now, a couple of things remaining to do. I want to change the dial lamps because both of them are blown, and I'll have to remove that that link from underneath. Now the clock's plugged back in, so I'll do that, and I guess I'll just snip them out. Where did that go? And this one. Okay, I hope these dial lamps are okay. I got them off Carl. Hard to get dial lamps these days. Anyway, that's screwing in okay. No, it's not. It doesn't seem to be working terribly well. I do have a couple of these old ones. I think they test okay. Just check. Yep, that tests okay. And I've got another one here. It's got a big lump of solder on the base. I think it must have been soldered in at some point, but it should be all right. I'll try putting them in, see if they work any better. That seems to work okay. Must be a slight difference in the screw base. That's loose. Why is that loose? So after a bit of a struggle, I've got the dial lamps in. They have a thin metal strip which sits inside the holder there, which I'd missed, and one of them had fallen out. So I found it, put it back in, all good. So I think we're ready to just run a test on it, make sure everything works. Because I've been messing with it, I'm going to put it on dim bulb, turn it on, and this should turn on the radio. They'll notice the clock's working. Yep, dial lamps are coming up, dim bulb's dying off. I'll put it on full power now because it doesn't have any shorts in it. And we should, by rights, have reception.
Earlier, all in unison.
Ever feel like the world is overflowing with news?
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. But Charlie Pickering and the team from the Weekly are prepared.
I mean, the reason it's gone so long is because it sends such a powerful message. And I mean,
and all sorts of things about
to date with vaccinations, and wear a mask in crowded places.
Real dropped out and Sir 13 Pocari.
Yep, well, it's working as well as it was before. I can't say the sound is wonderful on this. It's only got a little 4-inch speaker. It has no tone control. It's a very basic radio, AM only. I suppose if you get an alarm function with it, that makes up for some of its other shortcomings. But in any case, not a bad little unit. I'll see how it looks in the cabinet. I'm still not very happy with this dial, but at least the clock is working. By one of those strange coincidences that seem to happen in the world of radio repair, a gentleman just brought this in for me. He had seen my video on the other radio, the first part of it, and he's had this radio for a while. Bought it fully restored. He tells me that that the dial cord stopped working, so I pulled it out and replaced the dial cord and apparently straightened the drum, put it back together, and that it started to get hot and smell. So I'm a little bit wary about what's actually wrong with it, but it does have the correct knob for changing the time on the back, so I can have a look at what that is and copy off it. But let's just turn this on and just see what's happened. I'm going to put it on dim bulb because I'm not really sure what the problem is with it. In fact, I recognise this is one of Carl's cords. I've used the same ones in any number of restorations. So it's on dim bulb. Let's just turn it on and see. Geez, no, there's something seriously wrong there. That was full brightness. That's a dead short. Okay, I suppose I could take the back off it and see what's going on. I wasn't going to start on this until I'd finished mine, but I'm curious now, see what's happening. So I've got the back of it off it. Here's the time adjuster knob, and it's got the knob on that is the same as the ones on the front of the clock, and the end of it, I don't know if you can see that. I'll see if I can get it into. It has a small hole in it and a slot. I don't know if I can duplicate that or what I can do, but I'll give it a try. I'm not seeing anything around where the dial restringing was going. I thought it might be perhaps a dial lamp that had shorted to chassis or something like that, but no, nothing obviously wrong there. At least I don't think so. Oh, I don't like the look of that. Just looking at the transformer, and that looks cooked. Look, you've got the neutral wire going in here, a big blob of melted bitumen. There's actually I don't know if you can see it there, there's a drip of bitumen or pitch or whatever it is hanging down where it's got hot. I think the transformer might be cooked on this. I don't know why it would have done that. It looks like it's been a quite good restoration. Caps are changed, it's clean, it's got the filter caps replaced as well. Now this is interesting. I've got it running on dim bulb. I just went to lift the cabinet and something started shorting. So there's something not right in there. I'll take the cabinet off, see if I can see what it is. Okay, I was just looking around the chassis for anything that could be causing this trouble, and I noticed this wire to the dial lamp, which has obviously been replaced. It's green and yellow, should be earth wire, but this is the 6.3 volt line, and there's a blob of solder there, and it is for all the world touching the metal just here. Perhaps just the slightest movement has made it touch. Now that wire itself is not melted as far as I can see. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but it is an obvious potential short. So and then the wiring then goes from that onto the 6.3 volt line, which is a bit of dodgy rubber wire. I'll just make sure that's not shorting too. No, it's not, apparently. Something has been making that transformer overheat, and I guess a shorted filament winding might fit the bill. So I'll fix that up for a start. I mean, there's always the potential that that's not the problem, but gee, it looks a bit like it to me. I might just redo that solder joint, I can't look at that. So I just redid that solder joint and put a bit of heat shrink over it, so hopefully that won't short out again. I'm just going to put it back on dim bulb and see if we still have a problem, but it looks like it's working as it should. So we should be hearing music here shortly. Okay, I might just leave this on soak test for a while I continue with the cabinet of my radio, but I suspect that might be it. It's not doing anything silly now. I won't put it on full power just in case. I'll leave it running on dim bulb though. Just making up hopefully a time adjustment shaft for my radio, and I got this piece of stuff, I think it's off an old clothesline or something, and I'm just going to drill a hole in the end of it. I've centre punched it and see if I can put a cut across it, see how that goes. Okay, so it's got a hole in the end of that. Now I'll get a hacksaw and just do a cut across it. It's probably going to be pretty ugly, but I'm hoping it'll work. I'll also have to build this end up somewhat to put some kind of a knob on the end of it. I'll have to see what I've got. Okay, so that's what I've got. I'm hoping that will clamp onto it. I can probably put some pressure across it and squash it on. This is just mild seal, it's fairly soft, so it should be alright.
You'll pull the weight. Yeah, no, well done, lady. He's known to be a man of the ocean, isn't he? I've heard lots of stories of.
Well, it's back in its cabinet and working. Wasn't too difficult to put back in. I didn't video that. What I've done with the clock face is I ended up putting paint stripper on it to take the rest of the lacquer off, and immediately wiping the paint stripper off the numerals, and so I managed to keep most of them. I did lose a little bit here and there though. I then sprayed it with clear lacquer, Incralac, and left it at that. It's still showing a little bit of corrosion in places, but I think that's the best I can do with it. And what I plan to do is get a white paint pen and touch in the bits that are missing on these numerals, and I think then it'll look pretty much okay. At least that's probably the best I can do with it. With the time adjustment knob, this is what I've come up with. I've cut a slot in the back of it and drilled a hole down there as I showed you before. I put a bit of heat shrink over it so that if it falls it won't short anything out, and I had this white knob with the centre damaged in it, so I've just potted the shaft into that with a daub of epoxy putty, and that's pretty firmly set now. The interesting bit is going to be now I have to somehow feed this into the back of the clock and engage it with the pin, and there's no way that I could put this back together with this in place. It has to be put in afterwards as far as I can work out. So this will be fun, but let's give it a go. Now if I look through this hole here, I can see where I'm putting it more or less, and it's going in there. I have to more or less do it by feel. That seems to have engaged partly. No, there's something not right there. I might need to get a torch and shine it in there. Okay, now I can see better. There, that's gone right in now. Good. And it seems to be fairly firmly attached. And that now alters the time on the clock, and it's now, yeah, about 10:27 on a Sunday morning, so I'll turn it on.
To address that.
and to show the results of the performance on the field.
All right, you're a selector, perhaps. What do you do with that? What do you do with D. Warner?
I think
The College of Psychiatrists. Scott started visiting Kate in the evenings. She says sometimes they'd share takeaway meals, which he'd send her to collect and pay for.
Okay, I'm never satisfied. Tuning around on the radio after I had it back together, I wasn't really happy with its performance. It seemed to lack a bit of sensitivity and the sound seemed a bit weak and distorted. Now, you can access this test point for the plate voltage on the output tube without taking it out of the cabinet, and I did that, and it came out at just under 200 volts, was 189. It's currently showing 207, but of course our mains voltage varies a bit from time to time. It's supposed to be 250 according to the voltages specified in the service data. Now, looking back over my previous video, I noticed that it was sitting on 235 before I got it working. That is, before I cleaned the socket on that, I think it was a second IF valve. Now, fair enough, once that valve was conducting, it would have pulled down the plate voltage a little bit more, but that's way below what it's supposed to be. And I'm wondering what else could be causing it. I've changed every capacitor in this thing except this this mica cap here, and that is C20, and it just goes between the plate and the grid via a resistor, and I presume its purpose is to damp some high frequency oscillation. In any case, just to be sure, and I know micas don't usually go short or leak too much, but I clipped the lead and it made no difference at all, so I've just tacked it back on. Sorry I didn't show that. The only other cap I haven't changed is this one here, which is across the oscillator gang, and it's not going to make any difference at all, and if I mess with it I'll probably have to redo the oscillator, although I'll probably do an alignment now I've got it out again anyway. So that leaves me wondering what could be causing that low voltage, and I'm thinking maybe the only thing left is perhaps a 6X4 rectifier is getting a bit tired. I think I've got a spare one there, so I'll plug that in and just see if that makes any difference. Well, it turns out I don't have any spare 6X4s at all. I've got half a dozen 6V4s, but they're no good. So I've decided, well, I've pinched one out of another radio, so I've got a 6X4 out of another set. And I'll just change it over. Now that other radio, I don't know if it worked either. It's one that's just sitting there awaiting attention, so it may not be any good either, but it would be interesting to see if there's a change in the voltage with a different valve in it. So if I can maneuver this thing into the socket here, there we go. I'll put that in and we'll see what we get now. Okay, I've turned it on and it's coming up. We'll just see what we get. Well, that's higher already, 220, 227.
Anymore, but that's not how
230.
And he was saying today they think they will need more radios. He wasn't saying how many, but there.
So it still sounds a little bit distorted, but 230 volts is well, it's definitely higher than it was. I think that 6X4 is quite tired. Since I don't have another one to substitute and I haven't got to that other radio yet, I might put the dodgy 6X4 in it and just put a label on it to say that it's weak, and leave the decent one in this radio. Of course I don't know how much better it would be with a new 6X4. I could order one, I guess. I'm going to need one for the other radio anyway. I thought I would try changing the voltage tap on the transformer. It's currently on the 230 to 260 volt tap, and our voltage around here hovers around the 230, 235. So I've changed it to the 200 to 230 volt, the lower voltage tap, and we'll see what difference that makes.
Request for Eurythmic Sweet.
Well, it's running much better now that I've changed that rectifier tube, and the voltages are looking pretty good. I've got this meter on the plate voltage. It's supposed to be 250. It's a touch high tonight, 259. And the analog meter showing the screen voltage, and it's on about 170, something like that, 175. It's supposed to be, according to this, 165, so it's a touch high. But that's not too bad really. Looking good. So I've set it up to do an alignment on it. I've got the trusty old leader set to 455 kilohertz there, and it's been sitting on that for a little while, so it's nice and stable. The alignment instructions say that I should feed the signal into the aerial side of the gang, the tuning gang. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll have to feed in a very low level signal though. There's quite a lot of noise in here, I mean RF noise. I'll just feed in the lowest signal that I can hear above the noise reliably. That's probably good enough. Right, so I'll just set a reference point on the meter here. About there will do. And I'll see if I can get anything out of these coils. That's moving at least. Going down, so I'm going the wrong way here. Nothing out of that. That's peaked where it is. Might use a slightly higher signal actually. Now the fun part of this is I have to tip it upside down to do the bottom of this coil. So I'll do that now. I don't think I'm going to lose any clips in the process, I hope. Alright, now the bottom of that coil is there. And yes, it's turning, it's going down, up. Oh, I'm getting some out of that. Only a little bit, that's about it there. Right there. Okay, now, while I've got it upside down, I'll do the second coil. Here we go. There it's down, up. It's already peaked, so I'm going to get nothing out of that. And I'll just do the top of this one. That's it there. Okay, so I got maybe a little bit out of one of them. I don't think it's made any real difference, and I doubt if you'll notice any improvement in reception, but at least I know it's peaked. Okay, so now I'll do a rough RF alignment and see how close we are to the stations. The dial isn't terribly accurate on this thing, so it's not going to be very precise. Now, I thought at first that there were no markings on this dial for the alignment frequencies, but there are. You can just see a little mark down there, just right of 3AR, and that must be the 600 mark, I would think. It says to feed into the aerial lead 600 kilocycles and set the receiver to 600. So 450, 600 will be about there. I'll see if I hear it. Not really. Why am I not hearing it? It's way over there. After checking out the position of the dial pointer here, because I hadn't actually checked that, it is way out. It hits the stopper over here when the gang's open. Now there's that signal. But it has to be at least that far out because it stops there. So I'll just adjust the position of the pointer, and I think that's actually going to line up all right. Okay, so I've adjusted the position of the pointer so it stops just level with the end of the dial on this end, and hopefully stops, yep, that's it, the end of the dial on that end. So at least that's accurate. Now not much point in trying to align it by the dial if the dial isn't where it should be. So I'll put that on 600, and I should still have the oscillator set to 600. I'll just check. I'll turn on the radio, that'll help. I'm just waiting for it to warm up now. Well, looking at it, it's pretty close. It's maybe a millimetre to the side of it. But given that that oscillator core is so hard to budge, I'm going to leave it there. So next we set it to 1600, I think. 1500 kilocycles, and tune it to 1500 and adjust C11, and then we adjust the aerial. So I have to see if I can conjure 1500 out of the signal generator, and I'm using this the Victor Chinese frequency counter to check it against. And the irony is that I trust the old signal generator more than I trust the frequency counter, but never mind, it has to go up to scale C here. C is that one, and 1500 should be about there. 1501. So this is so accurate, amazing. Okay, so let's take that 1500 and feed it into the aerial at a nice low level, and it should be about here. Now if that is 1500, and if that indent on the dial is 1500, it's a little bit too high up, so I'll see if I can adjust it back down. And I guess that's this trimmer here. That's not really moving it at all, so I might have the wrong adjustment here. Let me just check. Okay, not so easy. Obviously it's the oscillator gang trimmer that I have to adjust, and that's this one here. And it's one of those ones with wire wound around a core, notoriously difficult to adjust. But what I've done is I've got a fine piece of wire here, and I've attached one side of it to ground, and I'm going to start wrapping it around the core. And the more I wrap around, the more the signal disappears, moving the tuning to the left. I've got the signal back here. Now if I take this out, move the signal to the right, and there it is. So unfortunately that's moving it in the wrong direction. What I need to do in that case is to remove some turns of that wire. So I'm trying with the razor blade to see if I can separate just one turn or a little bit off the end there, and it really doesn't want to come off. Aha, we have an end of wire. Let's see if I can get hold of that. I pulled a little bit off, so I'll tune it. Yes, that is moving it in the right direction. A bit further over. And this isn't wire, it's like a ribbon. And that is just about spot on. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll just nip off the end. Now while it's at 1500, I'll see if I can adjust the aerial trimmer here. Yeah, that seems to have a bit of a peak in it about there. Well, that's about as good as it's going to get. I'll just give it a bit of a trial run though, hook an aerial up to it and see if it'll talk to me.
The 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion.
To line up with the Australian cricket team's 4th test.
To Ukraine.
Says Ukraine needs to defend the good of the world.
If Putin were to succeed with his attack, other nations...
Well, it's sounding okay. I think I'll put it back in the case before anything else goes wrong. The instructions actually say to remove all the knobs from the clock before you do this. Well, I suppose I could. It makes it a little bit easier to get on. Plug is out, that's good. And I just slot it in here. Oh, before I do that, one thing I want to do. This dial light globe here, this shorted on the other radio I was working on, and it looks as if it wouldn't take too much to push that in there and make it short again. So I'm just going to take that wire off and put a bit of heat shrink over it to make sure it doesn't. So that's done. Here we go. Just feeding it in. Now just need to fit this socket to the rear. Sorry, it goes in that side. This is a factory fitted option, this socket, and it's switched by the alarm function, and the whole idea is that it turns on your table lamp or perhaps a kettle in the morning for you. I think a kettle would probably be a little bit too high a load for the switch contacts there, although it might be alright. I think I prefer to just work it with a light myself. There was a sticker on the back there which specified the maximum wattage rating of anything you plug into it, and that's sadly gone, so I don't know what it once was. And that's about it, apart from putting in the clock adjustment knob, and the knobs on the front, of course. This is made much easier if you have a torch. There we go. On with the knobs. And this little one here is a left-hand thread. The other two just push on. Okay. So it's not a bad little radio, going well. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos. It's been a little bit tedious with this one, but as always, thanks for watching, and I hope you can catch me in the shed for the next one. Bye for now.